All right. If you're into Mom Watch Canada, and I mean, come on, who isn't? They get into all the stuff parents need to know, right? But there's this one thing, kind of sneaky, that causes a ton of coughs and sniffles in kids, and they haven't really talked about it much. Human metapneumovirus. We'll take a deep dive into that today. It's like one of the most common reasons kids get sick, breathing-wise. But a lot of people, they've never even heard of it. So we've got research articles, medical reports, all that jazz ready to break it down.
Yeah, it's true. This little virus has been, like, under the radar, even though it's been around for, like, at least 50 years. And you're right, most kids have had it by the time they're, like, 5.
Okay, so, starting from scratch here.
Yeah.
What exactly is human metapneumovirus? I keep seeing it shortened to hMPV.
Okay, think of it like this. Our cells have these instruction manuals, right? Made of DNA. This virus, hMPV, it's got a different kind of instruction manual. It's called RNA. And because of that, well, it acts a bit differently than some other viruses you might, know about.
So not like the flu or a cold.
It's closer to RSV, actually. Respiratory syncytial virus, which, Mom Watch Canada has covered. They're kind of in the same family, virus-wise. But hMPV, it's its own thing. It's a troublemaker.
Oh, yeah, I remember that RSV episode. The comments were full of worried parents.
Mhm.
But okay, if this hMPV is so common, why haven't we heard more about it? It wasn't even discovered until 2001. That seems kind of late, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. Part of it is hMPV is, sneaky. I don't know a better word. It doesn't, replicate very fast, so it was hard for scientists to find it with, the tools they had back then. It's also, really picky. Where it grows, I mean. So it was hard to study it in the lab. Took a while for researchers to, isolate it and really see what it was doing.
Okay, so it's like, I'm going to catch a whisper, like in a hurricane.
Yeah.
It's there, but you could miss it easily. Okay, but let's get to the part parents really care about. What is hMPV DO to kids? What should we, watch out for?
Well, the symptoms are usually a lot like a cold or the flu.
Oh.
Cough, runny nose, fever, congestion, the usual stuff when your little one picks something up from, daycare or the playground.
Yeah, it sounds familiar so far.
Right.
But you're making it sound like there's more to this, right?
Right. The good news is most cases are mild and kids bounce back no problem. But like with a lot of viruses, hMPV can cause more serious problems. In some cases, especially in babies or kids with other health issues or older adults, we're talking bronchitis or even pneumonia, which is, obviously a much bigger deal.
Okay, so this is where it gets a bit more serious. What makes the difference between a kid getting a mild case or something worse?
Well, one thing that scientists have found that's really interesting is the amount of virus a child has, what we call the viral load, seems to be connected to how sick they get with hMPV, that is. The more virus, the worse the illness tends to be.
Viral load, is that how much of the virus is in their system?
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that this link between viral load and how bad the illness gets, it's not always there with other viruses, even ones related to hMPV, like RSV.
Well, that ISS interesting. Why would the amount of virus matter more with hMPV than RSV? They both seem to cause the same, symptoms.
Yeah, it's a question researchers are still working on. It could be how hMPV interacts with our immune system, or even how it copies itself inside our cells.
So we don't know everything yet, but knowing that viral load matters for how sick a child gets from hMPV, that's got to be important for parents to understand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if the amount of virus makes a difference, that means preventing exposure and, minimizing spread. That becomes even more important. And that kind of brings us to a really important point. Knowing how hMPV spreads can help us, figure out how to stop it.
Okay, so how does it spread? I'm guessing not by telepathy or something, although that would make things easier.
No, definitely not telepathy. It's actually pretty similar to how colds and, the flu spread. Through respiratory droplets, like when someone coughs or sneezes. Those little droplets, they can hang in the air or land on stuff, just waiting to be picked up.
And kids, they're like little touch machines, right? Always touching everything. Then their face, putting things in their mouth.
Exactly. So you can see how easy it is for this virus to spread around daycare or a classroom, even if kids aren't showing symptoms yet.
Yeah, it's like a microscopic game of tag, and no one wants to be it.
Yeah.
So let's say my kids start showing those, classic cold symptoms. What then? Do I need to, rush them to the doctor to get tested specifically for hMPV?
Well, it's always a good idea to check in with your doctor if you're worried, especially if your child is really young or has any health issues that make them more vulnerable. But most of the time, a doctor can, like, figure out what's going on based on the symptoms and, examining your child.
So no need for a special hMPV test most of the time.
Usually not. And here's something that might surprise some parents. There isn't a specific antiviral medication for hMPV.
Wait, really? No, like magic potion to make it go away. So what do you do if your kid gets it?
It's a lot like treating a cold, lots of rest, fluids, and, over-the-counter meds to manage the symptoms, like fever reducers or cough suppressants. The good news is, for most healthy kids, that's usually enough, and they get better on their own. But because we don't have a way to, like, target the virus itself, preventing it in the first place becomes even more important.
Okay, I'm sensing a theme here. Prevention. Prevention, prevention. So let's talk about that. What can parents actually do to, like, protect their kids from hMPV? And don't say wrap them in bubble wrap, because I've considered it.
I understand the temptation, believe me. But luckily, there are more practical things you can do. A lot of it is just, good hygiene, the same stuff you do to prevent colds and the flu.
Okay, hit me with the classics.
Hand washing, hand washing, hand washing. And I mean really washing, not just a quick rinse. 20 seconds with soap and water, scrubbing everything.
Oh, I try to get my kids to do that, but it's like they think soap is made of lava or something.
Yeah. Making it fun can help. Like, sing a song while you wash. Or let them pick out a special soap with a scent they like.
Ooh, good ideas. What else?
Teaching kids to cover their coughs and sneezes with their elbow or a tissue. Not their hands, that's important. And of course, if someone in the family is sick, try to keep them away from others, especially babies or, kids who are more vulnerable.
So basically, all this stuff we know we should be doing, but maybe get a little lazy about sometimes. It's a good reminder. But honestly, does all that really make a difference? With a virus like hMPV, I mean.
It really does. Think of it like layers of protection, right? Each one makes it a little harder for the virus to, like, spread. And since we don't have a vaccine for hMPV yet, these everyday things are our best defense.
Okay, that makes sense. It's all about, like, lowering the chances, right? Making it less likely the virus will spread.
Exactly. And that's especially important when you remember that viral load link we talked about.
Yeah.
Fewer chances of being exposed means lower risk of getting a high viral load and maybe a less serious illness.
Right. Yeah, that's sinking in. Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, RSV. We know hMPV is in the same, family, and they seem to cause a lot of the same symptoms. But what are the, like, key differences? How can parents tell them apart?
That's a great question, and a lot of parents have it. Honestly, it's often really hard to tell them apart based on symptoms alone. They both cause those, like, typical cold signs, and both can lead to more serious stuff in some cases.
So it's not like one causes a fever and the other doesn't, or one has a specific kind of cough.
Not really. There might be some small differences, but you can't always rely on them. And remember, every kid is different, so how they react to a virus can be different too.
So if you can't tell them apart by symptoms, how do you know which virus it is?
Sometimes a doctor might order a lab test, especially if they're worried about complications, or if there's, like, an outbreak of a specific virus going around. But most of the time, the treatment is going to be pretty similar, whether it's hMPV or RSV.
That makes sense. So focus on the symptoms, not necessarily the exact virus, unless there's a reason to think something more serious is going on.
Exactly. And again, prevention is key for both of them. So those good hygiene habits we talked about, they help protect against both.
All right, good to know. Now, I'm curious, we've talked about how similar they are, but there must be some differences between hMPV and RSV, right? Or otherwise, it will be the same virus.
Of course. One big difference is that we've known about RSV for a lot longer. hMPV was only discovered in 2001, so we're still learning about it.
So it's like the new kid on the block that we're all trying to figure out, besides, when it was discovered. What else is different?
Well, even though they're both RNA viruses, like we talked about, their genetic makeup is a little different. And remember that whole viral load and severity thing? That seems to be, like, more of a thing with hMPV than RSV.
Right, that viral load thing is still
Yeah.
kind of blowing my mind. It's crazy how a tiny difference can change how a virus, like, affects us.
Yeah, it really shows how complicated these viruses are and how much we still have to learn. But even with all that, there are things we can do to protect ourselves and our families.
It really is, like, eye-opening. There's always something new to learn about viruses, Even the ones we think we know, like the common cold, can be super complicated.
Yeah, definitely. And hMTV is a great example. It's been around forever, causing all those, sniffles and coughs. But we're only just starting to really understand it.
Okay, so bringing it back to our Mom Watch Canada listeners, What are the, key things parents should remember about hMPV? What's the need-to-know info to keep our kids healthy?
Well, first off, just knowing about hMPV is huge. It's so common, especially in little kids. So chances are your child will probably get it at some point.
Like the silent spreader lurking at playdates and daycare?
Aha, exactly. And because the symptoms are so similar to a cold, it's easy to, miss it. But it's important to know that hMPV can sometimes lead to more serious stuff, especially for kids who are, more vulnerable.
Yeah, like knowing the signs of a storm. You might not always get a hurricane, but you got to be ready just in case.
I like that. And just like prepping for a storm, taking steps to prevent hMPV is super important. All those hygiene things we talked about, hand washing, covering coughs and sneezes, keeping sick kids home, they might seem basic, but they're our best defense against this virus.
Right. Sometimes the simplest things are the most powerful. And since there's no specific treatment, prevention is like our only option.
Exactly. And I think it's important to stress that again. There's no magic pill for hMPV. So giving parents the knowledge and tools to prevent it is really key.
Knowledge is power, right? Speaking of knowledge, we've learned a lot about hMPV today,
Yeah.
but I'm sure parents out there still have questions.
Oh, for sure. And that's great. It means they're, thinking about their kids' health.
So to all the Mom Watch Canada fans listening, now that you know more about hMPV, what are you going to do to protect your family?
And what questions do you have for your doctor about this virus? Don't be afraid to ask. Being informed is the best way to keep your kids healthy. Right.
Absolutely. So that's it for our deep dive on hMPV. Stay healthy out there, everyone.